This is The Breakdown. What? Hey, everybody. What? I'm your host, Catherine, aka The High Heeled Gamer, and today I am joined by Terrance Grace, creator, writer, everything extraordinaire.
Lost you. There you are. There you are.
Here I am, of the comic book Locksmith. How are you doing today, Terrance?
I'm great. Thank you for having me on.
Oh no, thank you for taking time and being on the show. I really appreciate it. So let's jump right in. So I read all 4 of the Locksmith comics.
Oh, great. Awesome.
Yeah. Is there a 5th one, or does it end with the 4?
There's going to be at least 2 more.
Oh, okay.
And that was not planned. It kind of came about with some interest from a publisher that wanted me to extend it out a little bit. And so I left kind of a little cliffhanger at the end of 4. Yeah. So I call it's like the end of this first story arc.
Okay, gotcha. Because it seemed kind of final, but not really. So I was kind of not confused by it, but I was like, is it final or is it not? Because it just felt like it could be, but it might not be. You know what I mean? It had that good essence to it. Yeah. So even though I read all 4 of them, I always like the creator to explain to the audience what the story is about.
Well, I like to my 3-second pitches when I'm sitting at a table in a con is I go, imagine if Raymond Chandler wrote 2001: A Space Odyssey. So it's this neo-noir sci-fi adventure about a New York cop who, while he's investigating the murder of his brother, uncovers this gateway to all time, past, present, and future. Mm-hmm. And also a secret society of locksmiths that are tasked with protecting these various gateways around the world and actually the universe. And every locksmith has his or her own metaphorical key, and his key has to do with the death of his mother when he was a child. And so his whole journey has to do with going back in time and somehow forgiving himself for her death. And that in that process that saves the world from destruction.
Yeah, so I did get the noir feeling of it, and I'm not gonna lie, like the first couple of panels, once it came to be, I was like, is this present day or is this like old school feel to it? So it took me a minute. So that noir feel was definitely there. I definitely saw it in there. And I was actually going to ask you about the locksmiths without giving too much away, hopefully. I wanted to know, is it the same locksmith, or is it like you kind of hit at it where it's a club almost? So throughout time, is it the keys get passed down to somebody else? Could you explain that just a little bit, please?
Well, who the real locksmith is not going to be revealed until the very end. I mean, there are these other locksmiths, but they kind of change and transpose and transform. So it is kind of this mysterious thread as you're going through each issue, and it begins to open up and is like little pathways that change, and it's like, oh, wait a minute, I thought it was this, but it's not this. Well, what is it? So and each issue, it's not a closed story in each issue. It's like an ongoing, almost like a TV series. It's ongoing. So,
yeah. I definitely like that too, because I was like, oh, okay, we're going to keep this going. It's not its own little entity. And I like that a lot, because a lot of times stories tend to be like 1 and 2, and then it carries over to a new story arc type of thing. But yours is the whole series is these separate books. Did you start it off that way, or was it something like, maybe I should break this down
Well, it started out as a screenplay, which I wrote probably, more than 10 years ago. And my manager at the time was shopping it around, and we got some nibbles here and there.
Mm.
And a lot of people kept coming back to me and just saying, "Well, this is based on a graphic novel, isn't it?" And I go, "No, it's an original story." And so finally, my manager at the time said, "You really should consider adapting this," and then kind of reverse engineering the story. And I was like, "Okay." And that process just totally opened the story up. It's very, very different from the original screenplay. Characters are different, and it really just, I think it was the best thing. It just blew the whole top off, and it really, in this medium, you can really do a lot of very complicated storytelling that you can't necessarily do for film or TV. So it was great.
That's actually a good suggestion, because it definitely is true. You get more content in books and comics than you tend to do in movies, because when they go from comic to movie, they have to like eliminate so much, because it's kind of like almost a freeness to add details and backgrounds and things of that nature that movies and TVs kind of restrict you from
Yeah.
it. So I'm glad that you went this route, because it was very detailed, and I liked the story. I'm not gonna lie, I'm a simpleton, and a lot of the audience members know this. So there were times where I got a little lost and a little confused,
Yeah.
but that was on me.
Well, and you're not supposed to get everything. I mean, in fact, there are some foreign languages in there that I don't translate. I figure if you're interested enough, you can
Yeah.
get on the internet and go to Google Translate and
100%.
figure.
I was like, "Dear Google, what does
There
this
you
say?"
go.
Well, the Spanish was easy for me, because I'm Spanish, but once it was
Okay.
like the Latin stuff, I was like, what is this? So,
Right.
so your setting is in New York. Are you from New York?
I lived there for 25 years.
Sweet.
But originally I was born in LA, grew up
Okay.
in the Midwest, and then, was a sprite young lad of 20. I moved to New York, and that's where I grew up essentially. So,
Oh, okay.
yeah, and I didn't write it until after I moved back to LA, and I was kind of missing the city and had never written anything, specifically for New York, and I did, and that's how it was born.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm from New York, so anytime I see
Okay.
my city, I'm like, "What? This is awesome!"
Oh,
But
there
you
you go.
kind
So
of,
the number 7 train is in there, and
yes,
yeah,
yeah, I saw all of that. That's why I was like, "Oh, is he from New York?" Because there was
yeah.
a lot of little details, like the building landscapes and the river, the way it looks. I won't mention what's up with the river, but the river that you have in there, the way it looks. So I appreciated a lot of the details, and that's what made me think that maybe you was from New York, because of that setting. So was it hard to kind of get that essence of New York, being out of New York?
Well, no, it's definitely in my skin. I mean, the New York of today is not the New York that I remember. It's just I don't recognize it. And it's kind of why I moved, because it was you just kind of that old city
Yeah.
was lost. But what was interesting is working with Silvio DB, the artist. He's Brazilian,
Oh.
and he's never even been to New York. So whenever I had something very, very specific in the story that needed an accurate visual representation, I'd have to send a lot of referential images to him and just kind of explain it. But it's very cool. He was right there with me and just got it.
Okay, I thought he was, like I said, because a lot of the features that are in the artwork of New York Cities, that a lot of times people don't get, like Bronx buildings don't necessarily look like Manhattan buildings and things of that nature. I
Yeah.
thought it was just an overall New York team effort.
No, he lives in Recife, Brazil, and yeah, very different environment for him. So, and I think in a way that's almost even better having an outsider perspective, like they're discovering it with these referential images and descriptions that I send, and it might create a little bit of excitement and conflict, with the storytelling and the illustration. So,
How much hand did you have in telling, and I'm going to mispronounce his name, your
Silvio.
artist, Silvio,
Mhm.
how much hand did you have in what he drew? Meaning, did you tell him, no, this character has to look like this, or you just kind of gave him like a general detail?
Certainly, I think in the first couple of issues, I was extremely detailed. In fact, I laid out all the panels myself,
Okay.
and would even do thumb sketches. And I took it on as, I mean, I think the best kind of writing for this medium is if you almost look at it as if you're a film director. I mean,
Oh,
that's my background. So I, very specific with angles and screen direction, and so we did tests with all the characters, and I would give a whole background, even if a biographical background, even if it wasn't going to necessarily get into the story, along with many referential images. I mean, we started out in the very beginning with the detective. When I first wrote the story, I always had Steve McQueen in my head, that old Hollywood actor. You
oh.
know, he doesn't really look like that, and that's in a way Silvio kind of. I can see the Brazilian influence coming in there. So he's like transformed. But yeah, I was very specific. And the last couple of issues, 3 and 4, I no longer laid it out unless it was
Oh,
very specific. Because by
very.
then we had a great working relationship, and I understood how he's going to perceive things, and he certainly got me. So that it became easier in a way.
Well, I was getting ready to ask, like, once the progression, because it's you're on comic number 4. Once that progression kind of, it seems to flow even easier between you guys. Is that the safe thing to say?
Yeah, I think so, definitely. And the way I write these, and these issues are almost like double issues each one. They're between 40 and 48 pages long. I tend to write maybe in 10, 15 pages at a time, even though I know where it's going to go.
Oh, okay.
And I send that script off to Silvio, just because I do kind of like to get back what he's drawing and maybe change a little
Okay.
bit. And it's I look at it as creating a sculpture together,
Mhm.
as opposed to here's the script, okay, go and draw it, and then that's it. I kind of like to change stuff and go back and you know what, let's add a page in there, or let's change that panel up. And so feeding him 10 pages at a time makes that easier.
Yeah, as opposed to just dumping it all there and then getting something all back and then having to re-edit. It makes sense. And I like that analogy that you did where it's kind of like sculpting something together, because in essence it really is like you guys
Yeah.
are trying to create this wonderful story in visual art for people to actually have something to go with the story. So you said a lot, because of your producing background, you have certain angles, and I actually thought that was good that you brought that up because I was going to bring it up too. So I am not like an expert by any chance, so please take this with a grain of salt. But I love when it's not the cliche always facing front, always seeing someone, or just the side. You have you and Silvio do these magnificent top down views, and not just side angles, but it still is a side angle, but you can see most of their face a lot. How important was that for you to try to be in essence different than regular traditional comic book panels?
Very important, because I mean, first of all, I have to be engaged by it myself,
True.
and and any kind of visual medium that I'm going through. I really, with this, where it's more of I guess a realistic kind of storytelling. It's not a superhero, fantastical thing. So I want, as a reader, I want to believe that this is actually happening.
Yeah.
You're in Yonkers and it's really happening. So yeah, I approach it as if I'm shooting a film. I mean, that's really what I'm most comfortable with. I wish I could draw those angles. I can't. But what I do sometimes is I will, if it's a very complicated visual setup, I will create my own 3D models that I can and a set that I can look at from any angle, and
Oh, wow.
pose the camera, and then I'll send that off to Silvio.
I don't think I've ever heard anybody say something like that. Is so fascinating to me.
I don't do it all the time because it's time
Yeah, yeah.
consuming,
But
but it also helps me to visualize and see if the continuity is going to make sense, and if it's going to be dynamic in the page. And so yeah.
that's actually really, really cool. So, can we talk a little bit about the bad guy, or would that be giving away too much?
You mean Lucero, that
Mhm.
that bad guy? Because they're
Yeah.
kind of, yeah. It's everything that I write has some basis in real history,
Mhm.
and there is an African deity that is kind of similar to what you might have heard of Papa Legba in,
Oh,
and Lucero is associated with
okay.
that deity,
Gotcha.
and in the Palo tradition,
Mhm.
Voodoo, Haiti, Afro-Cuban.
Santeria and stuff like that. Yeah.
Exactly. So when I was first coming up with this entity, I wanted it to have some sort of an African basis, but something that would easily be believable, that exists in New York City. And that's how that started. And it was just, I can't give this away because this kind of
Okay.
comes out at the end of issue 3, but this was totally by accident.
Oh,
The translation, the Spanish translation, even though it wasn't Spanish, of Lucero, is literally, bright star. And that, when I was doing research into 17th century African Congo, I can't give that away. We kind of end up there
mhm.
in the story. There really was an entity or some sort of an alien presence
Oh.
that was named Bright Star,
Oh,
and
wow.
and it blew my mind. I was like, oh my gosh, this is
That's
real.
that's
So
wow.
that's
That's
all I can say. I don't
okay.
want to
Yeah.
give it anymore. Yeah,
Well, I thought Lucero was you was using the Spanish for Bright Star, and I was like, oh, that makes sense, even
yeah.
though it's not fully like, you know, the name of it. But that's what I got from it before it, was. So I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. I so let's get into your character Mickey just for a little bit. So how much of Mickey is based on a real person and how much of him is imagination?
Um,
I have my theories.
okay, all right. Certainly, him, this New York cop, this Irish New York cop is kind of, it's that noirish character that is we all know. So he's not necessarily based on any one specific person.
Okay.
You thought? Well, you tell me in a minute. Um, but certainly his inner journey. I bring a lot of that,
Okay.
my own background to his psyche, and
Gotcha.
that certainly his interior is based on many people that I know and my own family, and so it had to ring true in that sense.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Who did you think? Who did you think? Yeah.
So I thought it was like a marriage between, and I can't remember. You remember the cop show NYPD Blue?
Yeah.
Okay, so there was a the skinny guy, and I can't remember his
Oh
name.
gosh.
Yeah, I thought it was a marriage between him and the guy in Law and Order SVU. Uh, I thought it was a marriage of both of them because I'm like, oh my god, it kind of reads like that.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so that's what my
No,
guess was.
not at all.
But it's
But
not.
that's cool.
Yeah, and it's not so much that it's just like them. It just kind of reads like them. You know, that tough guy.
Yeah.
I almost know everything, but I'm still somewhat vulnerable-ish when it comes to certain topics. So it definitely felt that way for me. And I was like, I can dig this.
Well, that noir tradition where the hero, everything tends to happen to that guy or that girl, and in a way, this journey, this story is happening outside of that character, and they just, Mick is constantly getting beat up. In
Mhm.
fact, he likes it.
Yeah.
It's his own pain, his own suffering, his own lack of self-forgiveness, and that's part of that story. And that is a typical noir character journey. So maybe that's what you're seeing, because there is definitely a mythology that a lot of writers tap into.
Was it difficult to try to find both his strengths, his weaknesses, and then his flaws? Because it's three different things that he has strengths, weaknesses, and flaws. Was it difficult to find each of those things, or did it kind of flow pretty naturally for you?
I think once I write a biography of every character, a short little blurb that I can just have in my head, and certainly knowing what happened to him, where he lived, the kind of family he had.
Mhm.
Uh, you know, when you know that as a writer, you can write that character as an adult. So even though that is revealed in little bits and pieces to the reader through the series, I know that. I know what is driving his all of his issues, his anger that comes out.
Yeah. And I actually appreciate that because a lot of times you get the characters everything in that first issue, but you definitely left so much detail for the next one and the next one and the next one. Because I was still like discovering things still in issue 4. I was like, oh, okay, that was never said. That's pretty cool. And I like the whole give me something so I can keep coming back type of thing.
Yeah.
Did you have an influence as far as like a comic book writer or story arc that you was like, that's not so much that you want to be like them, but it was like, oh, that's inspiring.
Hmm. Certainly not in a typical comic tradition where each floppy is kind of a self-contained story, with a larger story arc for the whole series. I wanted it to. I mean, Neil Gaiman is certainly the complexity of his writing and storytelling is someone I completely look up to. I also, even though there's not a match here, very influenced by Watchmen and that
Oh,
storytelling.
yeah.
And in fact, then later on, when the HBO series came out, and I saw how that was adapted, it was really thrilling for me because I thought, now that's how you adapt it. That's the movie was I liked, but
Yeah.
the series was
Oh, 100.
amazing, and
Yeah.
it was it was really so yeah. There's that
I
stuff
don't,
that I like.
yeah, I don't see like similarities in that, but I get how something like that could inspire you and be like, oh, I like that. And it just motivates you to do your own style and your own niche and things of that, which I think is like super cool. And I'm really happy to hear that there's more on the
Yeah.
way.
Well,
Um,
I can't when I'm writing. I don't read anything else or even watch anything
um,
else because I don't want. I mean,
oh,
you're influenced by
true.
unknowns, but I don't want to be directly influenced. I try to cr- be the true creator here,
Okay, and that
if
makes sense
possible.
too. Yeah, because a lot of times it even can happen like subconsciously, like you don't even realize it, and
Yeah,
so that makes sense to kind of isolate yourself from it, so it could be true to you. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And,
yeah.
and what you are thinking and what's in your heart with it. So that makes actually perfect sense.
I think when I first started writing way back the screenplay, I did page through several noir novels and stories, back in the day,
Mhm.
40s, 50s, 60s, just so I could get a better sense of the punchy dialogue and
Um,
the rhythm of speaking.
mhm.
And then once you kind of have that, and you form, every character kind of has his or her own rhythm, and then they just start talking, and you're like taking dictation down. So
Wow. So we're coming up to the almost the very end of our wonderful discussion. I could definitely keep going, but if I keep going, I'm going to end up asking spoiler questions because I have one specific question that I want to ask you off air, just
okay,
in case it is a spoiler, so we don't have it on air.
okay.
But so I want people to definitely follow you, find the books, where can they find you on social media and all that good stuff?
The central website is mythicoctopus.com. Mythicoctopus, one word.com. And it's like, how does that come from the
I know. I'm
locksmith?
like, where did that come from?
um, well, because I've got other things going on aside from the locksmith series, and all of a sudden I had 4 different websites,
Oh.
and I was thinking this is not going to work. So I this this title name came to me one day. Actually, there was a Lovecraftian influence to that H.P. Lovecraft, because a year ago or a couple years ago I was invited to write a short story for this Lovecraft anthology. Cthulhu is hard to spell,
Yeah.
um,
It is.
and that's the title. so So I wrote that story, and there's a second anthology, which I also have a story in. So Lovecraft was in my head when I came up with Mythic Octopus, and not to give the big one away, but you'll see in issues 5 and 6 of the Locksmith much more of a Lovecraftian influence. And that's all I'll say.
Okay, I'm excited. I'm always excited. I always like when I like stuff because it's like, oh, I want more. It's always good. Are you on
Awesome.
Are you on social media by any chance as well?
Yeah, Twitter, the handle is Mythic Octopus, and Instagram, which I don't use all the time, but I'm there, Mythic Octopus. So, and then Facebook, I have a page. You can search by my name, Terrance
Oh, okay.
Grace. So.
Cool. I like your background, by the way. Mixed space.
Yeah, that's and you can see
Oh, yeah. Likes it. Likes it
since
a lot.
all the cons are shut down. This is my kind of con background.
Your con background.
Yeah.
For now, they'll be back in a couple of days.
I hope so.
God,
I mean, I literally just published 4, and then this whole season is shut down. So it's
oh,
yeah.
that'll be all right. Well, now they can go to your website and grab those up
Yep.
and read them and hold on to them and then get them autographed at the next con that she'll pop up on.
Awesome. And you can also get them in Comixology, and Kindle versions are on Amazon as well. So
Oh, yeah. We'll put links for all of that. Terrance, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to talk to little old me.
it was great. I
And
love talking to you.
if you don't mind, once we go off the air, do you mind staying so I can ask you that one question that's like
Sure.
burning in my head?
Okay. I hope I can answer it.
Thanks.
Okay.
Well, as always, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Like, share, subscribe. Go find Terrance Grace and his wonderful Locksmith comics. I promise you, you will not regret it. It's a good read. And I'll see you guys next Wednesday. Bye.